Okay, year five. Okay, cool. So we now know what a fraction is, simply what a fraction is, don't we? And we know what they look like with the two numbers and the line through them. So we know how to build them, and we know what they mean if we read one. So now we're going to move on to unit and non-unit fractions. All right, unit and non-unit fractions. Okay, but before we start that, I wanted to run through some common fractions that we use today. The most probably I'd say the most common. Okay, so let's start at the top. So let's remember when we're doing our fractions with our two numbers and our line through the middle that our bottom number is our denominator, and our denominator tells us how many pieces our whole has been made into, has been broken down into. Okay, so in this case is a 2. Our numerator tells us how many pieces we have to play with. Okay, but this fraction is, and I'm sure most of you already know and shouting it out, this is what we call a half. Okay, because that means there's 1 out of 2 we have. All right, and so we're going to show it like this. So we're going to go back to our pizza from yesterday, and I'm going to shade it in the best I can on this interactive board. I think that's a good enough attempt. All right. So we've got our whole, we've got our pizza, and we've split it down the middle into 2 pieces. Okay. And we have 1 piece. That means we have half of the pizza. All right. That means we have half of the pizza, or 1/2, a half. All right. Let's move down. The next one is a quarter, is what we call a quarter. Okay. Because I've got my whole, let's say chocolate bar, and I'll split my whole into 4 equal bits. Remember, with fractions, all the parts need to be equal. I'll split my chocolate bar into 4 different pieces. I've got 1. Okay, that means I've got 1/4. I've got 1/4 of the chocolate bar. All right. Okay, let's move on. You're probably starting to see the pattern now. In this time with the chocolate bar, it's a bit smaller, this one, so I've split it into 3. I've split it into 3 pieces, or I've split it into thirds. All right, 3 pieces, or I've split it into thirds, and I'm going to highlight or shaded 1 piece of chocolate, and I'm going to give that away. I'm going to give it to myself today. All right, so this represents or shows us 1/3. Okay, and the last one, and I'm sure you're all shouting out already, is 1/5. All right, that's 1/5 because I've got my whole and I've divided it into 5 equal parts. All right, so they've become fifths, and I've shaded in 1 because our numerator tells us we've got 1, so that's 1/5. All right, so there's some common fractions. All right, that if you haven't heard already, you're going to hear a lot more of. All right, so now let's look at what a fraction. Sorry, let's have a look at our title. So a unit and non-fraction units. All right. Now, when we think of units, what do we think of? Have a little think. Have 5 seconds. What do we think? What's a unit? Or another word would be a one. A ones. Cool. So yeah, it's anything like a unit number, isn't it? Like a small number. All right. So when we say a unit fraction, any of these 5, they're all unit fractions because their numerator has a 1. Okay. All the numerators on that column have a 1. Oh, I'm moving shapes. Okay, but if I was to go, let's go to 1/4, for example, and now I'm going to give 2 more away. All right, so we got 1 there, and I'm going to give that 1 away as well. Okay, so now we've got 1, 2, 3 out of 4. So now the numerator becomes a 3 instead of the 1. The denominator always stays the same. So now we've got 3/4 instead of 1/4. Now this numerator, it isn't a 1, it's a 3. So we now know that it's a non-unit fraction. Okay, that's a non-unit fraction, and if our numerator is a 1, let's move it aside a bit. Our numerator is a 1 on this side, and that means it's a unit fraction. So let's have a look down here. We've got 1/3, another example. So 1/3 and 1/3, because of the 1 in the 1/3, it is a unit fraction. But I'm going to shade in one more. So instead of the 1, we have 2 now. So on our new numerator will be 2. Again, denominator stays the same. And because that number is not 1, it now becomes a non-unit fraction. Apologies for the writing. I need to get a little bit better at that. Okay, so we've got the last one, and I'm going to shade in like that. And I'm going to give you one hint that the denominator stays the same in the 5 because there's 5 pieces. We split our chocolate bar into 5 pieces, 5 equal pieces. Okay, so can anyone shout out what our new numerator would be? Yeah, I think I heard a 3 then, which is great. And because it's 3, it is a non-unit fraction. Okay, so it's as simple as that, guys. If the numerator is a 1, it's a unit fraction. If the numerator is anything else, it's a non-unit fraction. All right, so we're gonna have a little practice of those, and then we're going to be moving on to equivalent fractions. All right, guys, and I'll see you very soon. Goodbye.